Hello, I'm Elizabeth Chatsworth. I'm a British author who lives in Connecticut, USA. I'm delighted that you could join me today to chat about my debut fantasy novel, The Brass Queen. So, who is the Brass Queen? Well, allow me to introduce Miss Constance Haltwhistle. In a steam-powered world, Constance is the last in a line of blue-blooded rogues. Selling firearms under her alias, the Brass Queen, has kept her baronial estate's coffers full. But when US spy Trusdale saves her from assassins, she's pulled into a search for a scientist with an invisibility serum. As royal foes create an invisible army to start a global war, Constance and Trusdale must learn to trust each other. If they don't, the world they know will literally disappear before their eyes. So that's the official blurb. Now, this is a steampunk tale, which means it's set in an alternate 19th century world where science and technology are taking a divergent path to our real history. Our heroine, Constance, keeps her estate finances running by designing bespoke, ether-powered ray guns and blunderbusses to her underworld clients, and also to a few royal personages, because she's not too fussy where the money comes from when the novel opens. She comes to realize through the novel that perhaps she should be engaging with people in a more positive way than merely creating weapons and selling them. Her journey is a hopeful, humorous adventure in a fantastical world where progress, both personal and technological, are always a possibility. Constance is an unconventional heroine who is fearless, independent, and brilliant, and she knows it. She's a debutante, an underworld weapons designer, and an amateur scientist who dabbles in interdimensional travel. She sets the bar for the alpha heroine, fighting for her found family in a brutally conformist Victorian society. The message of the book is that one person, however flawed, can change the world for the better. My heroine starts the novel hosting her own coming out ball. By the end, she's commanding an airship and fighting for the rights of the oppressed everywhere. She learns to speak for those who are voiceless, which is something I hope we can all do in our daily lives. Due to an archaic law, she's found that she will lose her family estate in 3 days if she doesn't marry. Hence, she is hosting this ball to find an immediate husband. Things do not go well. So without further ado, I'll read the first few pages of The Brass Queen. Chapter 1. A Night to Remember. Tuesday, May 18th, 1897. The Royal Steamworks Exhibition Dome, Sheffield, England. Just an aside, that's my hometown, so I know Sheffield quite well. The grass was always greener in another dimension. Miss Constance Haltwhistle imagined that in a parallel world, she was actually enjoying her coming out ball. A taller, less red-haired version of herself was waltzing in the arms of a dashing beau. Young noblemen, resplendent in white tie, were lining up for the opportunity to propose holy matrimony, and no one had tried to kill her in weeks. Her score for the evening stood at marriage proposals none, embarrassing incidents 24 and counting. Dropping an ivory fan into the punch bowl had raised eyebrows. Wearing steel-toed ankle boots instead of dance slippers had drawn more gasps than she'd anticipated. And mistaking a cigar in an earl's pocket for a concealed weapon, then demanding he disarm himself before she damned well did it for him. Alas, sometimes a cigar was just a cigar. She strode through the crowd, recalled her need for an instant husband, and added a coquettish swing to her bustle behind. She glanced over her shoulder as laughter erupted from her aristocratic guests. Her unmarked dance card lay upon the parquet floor. She'd missed her bustle pocket again. Cheeks aflame, she scooped up the errant card and scurried into a forest of willowy debutantes. Each swan-necked beauty held the attention of at least 3 bachelors, none of whom spared Constance a second look as she made her way toward the center stage. Mentally rehearsing her, hopefully crowd-pleasing speech, she skirted the edge of the dance floor. Shoulders hunched, she snuck glances at her guests as they clustered in their favorite cliques. They posed and preened, blissfully unaware of the multiverse, ever secure in the knowledge there was safety in numbers. Thanks to her portal-tripping mad scientist of a father, she alone knew better. Perhaps in one of those alternate worlds, she was already dead. A pale corpse slumped beside the dance floor, crimson light staining the parquetry as the orchestra played on. Or she was dying, cradled in the arms of a love-struck Adonis, who dabbed her brow as she murmured, "No, really, I'm fine. Do try the vol au vents. Oh, how he'll miss me." The dance floor teemed with euphoric couples gazing into one another's eyes. Drunk on champagne and true love, they eddied like rose petals in a whirlpool. Constance stomped by, thoroughly regretting her choice of footwear. The floor trembled beneath her boots as 36 formally attired couples waltzed to the blue Danube with the precision of an infantry brigade. Heirloom tiaras glittered in the gaslight under the vaulted glass dome. A crystal bauble beneath infinite darkness, built by humans who reached for the heavens but fell short. Without the dazzling lure of the exhibition hall, she'd have been a party of one, but the gallery's artistic display of military hardware had proven to be an irresistible draw for her 200 guests. Constance held her breath as she passed through clouds of cigar smoke tinged with lavender perfume. Her guests' fine silk gowns and waistcoats blurred into a pastiche of jewel tones and monochrome blandness as she weaved between the nobles. Her reclusive life on the family estate had not prepared her to sail through the starched sea of British gentry with the poise displayed by every other attendee. It was all down to her speech to prove herself worthy of their respect. "This is it, my moment to shine. I'll make them all love me or die trying. Nothing and nobody will stop me from..." Her face slammed into a muscular chest. She staggered back, clutching at her nose as tears welled and blinked up between her fingers. A tall, dark, almost handsome stranger gazed down at her. His eyebrows were raised over ridiculously blue eyes, bright as sapphires against shockingly tanned skin. Neatly trimmed sideburns and a square, clean-shaven jaw framed a nose that appeared to have involved itself in numerous brawls. Such a nose must assuredly belong to a ruffian. Heart-pounding, she brought up her fists, ready to punch the potential assassin. The ruffian grinned. Strike or smile? A decade of Mistress Ying's kung fu instruction kicked in. She swayed her weight onto her rear boot, leaving her front ready to smash his kneecap with as much violence as the situation required. The trespasser raised his hands in surrender. If he was an assassin, he was certainly taking his sweet time about it. And there didn't seem to be any telltale lines of hidden weapons beneath his clothing. But what odd clothing it was! The lone stranger was apparently unaware that a gentleman never wore a hat indoors. Particularly not a black Stetson that seemed to have survived one too many cattle drives. His all-black ensemble would have suited a gunfighter on the cover of one of Papa's dime novels, save for his leather gloves and the lack of a revolver. Did he think this was a costume party? "Are you all right, miss?" His voice resonated with a suspiciously American accent, deep and slow, conjuring images of deserts, mountains, and rolling plains bestrewn with bison. "It's a crowded spot for that level of speed. You got somewhere better to be?" She narrowed her eyes at the inadequately armed gunslinger. "From your dialect, I'd venture you're from Texas, or Nevada, or Colorado, or Nebraska, or—" "Do I get a say in this?" "Wyoming?" He shook his head. "That's 5 states down, 40 to go. You some kind of language expert?" "I read." Papa's 32-volume Legends of the West contained many thrilling tales, but none depicted uninvited cowboys invading white-tie events in Yorkshire. "If you must know, I was raised in Kansas. My mother was an Army nurse, my father is a retired U.S. cavalry officer, and my siblings—" "I don't need your life story, thank you very much." For heaven's sake, Kansas would have been her very next guess. Why couldn't he have waited for her to get there? She scanned the crowd for quirked brows and dropped jaws at the cowboy's presence. Fortunately, the tiara and white tie set was pointedly ignoring the stranger, as the British do when foreignness exceeds their comfort level to an unspeakable degree. Or perhaps they were pointedly ignoring her. Constance dropped her fist and adopted a nonchalant pose. He didn't appear dangerous. For now, it was best not to make a fuss and further disrupt the party. The American warily lowered his hands and bowed. "Justice Franklin Trusdale, at your service. You can call me JF." Her hasty reading of Babette's modern manners on her way to the party suggested otherwise. "I'll do no such thing until we are introduced by a mutual acquaintance, or by letter. Have I ever written you a letter?" "I don't think so, miss. If I tell you who I am, that would be an introduction, which I cannot do without—" "A letter. Got it." A generous grin spread across his rugged face. Her heart drummed a little faster than was seemly for a well-bred lady, but she didn't have time to consort with cowboys. She leaned towards Trusdale. "Look, do you mind moving out of my way? I'm heading to the stage." "Aha! That explains it. You're the entertainment." "I beg your pardon?" "Your crazy getup, the chainmail corset." He nodded toward her neckline. Sure enough, the velvet ribbon she had stitched along the top of her gown had slipped to reveal her chainmail undergarment, her last defense against the knives of her family's enemies. She groaned. "Oh, for goodness sake." Constance grabbed the metal links and tried to wiggle them down inside her gown, keeping her eyes on Trusdale. The cowboy's grin widened, but he raised his gaze to the ceiling. He studied the stars twinkling through the glass dome as Constance swore softly at the unruly links. "This place must be something to see from up there." "The locals call it the Crystal Octopus, presumably because of the display halls that splay out from the dome. The glow of the lamps can be seen from over a mile away." A violent shimmy sent the offending links below the velvet ribbon. Trusdale glanced down at her with a smile. "Consider me impressed." She tugged the ribbon high, wincing as stitches snapped. he chuckled. Interesting armor. Boy, I sure do love carnival acts. So tell me, are you a fire eater, or do you have a partner who flings knives at you? Is there a rotating wheel involved? She gasped at the very thought of such theatrics. Admittedly, the chainmail had stretched her green silk ball gown to the bursting point over her prominent bosom and cruelly cinched waist. The tautness added a burlesque flair to what should have been the most stylish ensemble of her life. But a fire eater? Heavens, no! Sir, I'm no entertainer. As you're clearly not an invited guest, I suggest that you leave before the authorities are called. No need for that now. I'm here with... You'll find the exit to your left, sir. She fixed him with her sternest stare, the one that made her stable boys stop playing cards and saddle her horse in record time. He blinked and stepped out of her way. She swept by the interloper. She'd have words with the security staff about letting in undesirables. It would be unusual for a professional assassin to don a Stetson. In her experience, hired killers tended to be rather dull in their choices of hat, seeking to blend in rather than stand out. She'd certainly had her fill of assassins over the last few weeks. It was such bad timing that one of her oldest arms clients had decided to terminate her contract, and her with it. As if planning a ball wasn't demanding enough, she had to deal with inept thugs at every turn. All this for nothing but a simple shipping mix-up? Admittedly, King Oscar II of Sweden had lost a war when his globally prohibited armaments had been accidentally sent to Scunthorpe instead of Stockholm. But still, such administrative misunderstandings could surely be resolved without bloodshed. Why can't everyone be reasonable, like me? Beside the raised stage, Dr. Maya Chauhan, who happened to be her favourite arms client, winked mischievously. Maya was happily plump and perfectly comfortable in a voluminous gold sari that could double as a sail in the event of high winds. The grey-haired Delhi-born genius was the Empire's most celebrated military scientist and head of the Royal Steamworks, Britain's wool laboratory. Maya was a prominent example of Queen Victoria's realization that intelligence and innovation were not solely limited to those born within a day's ride of London. Victoria might be a despotic, parliament disbanding, mass hanging of opponents type of queen, but she knew talent when she saw it. I'll leave it there. So, Maya is working for Queen Victoria, who in my world, unlike in the real world, of course, was a despotic lunatic who is trying to carve up the world for her own pleasures. And the Brass Queen is ultimately going to come into some conflict with that. But don't tell Victoria, that's a secret between you and I. So I have a few minutes left, so I'll talk briefly about how I started writing this book. And it was when I was approaching a very special birthday, my 50th birthday, and I realized of the many things I hadn't achieved in life, I had never written, well, anything in the fiction line, although I was an avid reader. So at this rather late age, I decided to try and write my first book, and here it is. So I think the moral of the story is it's never too late to get started. And I'd signed up for various writing classes, and one of them was by David Farland, and he gave me a great start in how to write. And over the next 6 years, I have spent time trying to become a better writer, editing, finding an agent, losing an agent, finding a publisher, and now finally this book will be published on January 12th, 2021. And it will be published as both a hardcover, a paperback, an audiobook, and even a large print book. So I'm getting 4 books for the price of one, which is wonderful. So there is actually a pre-order that's going up very shortly. If you'd like to actually hear more about this book and read about the adventures of Constance and Trusdale, you can head to my website and find out all about it. That's elizabethchatsworth.com. And do feel free to drop me a note. I'd love to hear from you. And if you mention the fact that you like scones, I'll send you my world famous scone recipe. So that's a bargain. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the reading and I hope you have a wonderful week. Goodbye.